I'm Garry Barnes. Welcome to Stringham Real Estate Edge. Today's guest is Alicia Holdaway, former president of the Salt Lake Board of Realtors and current realtor with Summit Sothebys International. Welcome, Alicia. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Alicia, how long have you been in the industry?
Technically, since 2009 is when I got my license, and I became a realtor in 2012.
I see. And what was the attraction?
Well, my previous career was really focused on personal development, life coaching, business coaching, etc. And what I loved about that career was just the engagement in people's life journeys, if you will. But frankly, I'd been in that career for a long time and no longer challenged. It was really monotonous at that point. And so I was looking for a new career. And real estate gave me the option to really engage in people's life and their journey, because buying a house is such a big part of that. But also have the autonomy to my schedule, the income potential, all the things that comes along with it.
Real estate is such a broad industry. Do you specialize in any particular area of real estate?
Residential.
Strictly residential.
Strictly residential.
Okay.
Yep.
As the president of the board, what's the mission? What's the objective of the organization?
So technically our mission kind of has 4 components to it, and that's advocacy, communication, knowledge, and service. In my eyes, we're there for our members. We're there to serve our realtors and giving them the ability to just go and do their job every day, taking care of a lot of the things on the back end to make sure that they're able to go out and serve their clients.
How many members to the board?
Currently, we have just shy of 9,500 members.
Now, are they all within the city or the county?
Not necessarily. Our focus at the Salt Lake Board is Salt Lake County. That's where we advocate and things of that nature, but we have members from all over the place.
Is membership mandatory for a new licensee?
Not at all. You can be a real estate agent without being a realtor. But if you want the benefits of membership, which is the MLS and again, the advocacy, CE classes, the legal hotline, all of those member benefits, then you would obviously have to become a realtor. The biggest thing about membership there is you're holding yourself to a higher standard because you then subscribe to the code of ethics. So you really subscribe to being a true professional.
I've noticed that you've used the term realtor several times. Can you differentiate that from a real estate agent? Yeah,
it's exactly what I just said. It's ultimately boils down to the code of ethics. So when you can be a licensee and have a license with the state licensing division, if you will, to practice real estate without being a realtor. But being a realtor means that you have subscribed to the code of ethics and you pledge to uphold the code of ethics and be a true professional.
And do you have residential and commercial agents as members of the board?
We do.
So you have a commercial side to the board as well.
Yeah, it's much smaller. A lot of commercial agents are not realtors, but we have a commercial committee at the board, and we try really hard to engage that commercial landscape, if you will, into our network.
There are at least a dozen, perhaps more, boards around the state. What is the relationship between these organizations, or is there one? Yeah,
there ultimately is. You have both boards and chapters. So in really small areas where you have maybe 50 members, a lot of times you have a chapter. But ultimately, the relationship is that you're all part of NAR, the National Association of Realtors, but more intimately, the UAR, Utah Association of Realtors.
I see.
So all boards and chapters in Utah are members of the Utah Association of Realtors, and we then connect through that.
How long have you been with Summit?
Since April of 2018.
How'd you go about picking Summit as your broker?
Yeah, that's a good question. So really, I was at the point of my career where I just desperately wanted to be around the best in the industry. Real estate is something I take really, really seriously, and was just striving to be the best I could be. And I kind of had topped out at my last brokerage. And so I decided I wanted to go where I was not the top producer, right? I wanted to be around the best of the best and just rise with, all boats rise with the tide, right?
Sure,
And so
indeed.
I just wanted to be around the best in the industry.
Sure.
And Sothebys really takes the approach of quality over quantity. And that I was drawn to that.
Mm-hmm. I understand that Sotheby's is an auction house in New York City.
Yeah.
Is there a relationship between the two organizations?
Yep, it is. So basically, Sotheby's Realty, International Realty, is an arm of the Sotheby's auction house, which is really cool. We have like an over 100-year-old heritage. So it's cool.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Alicia, is there a particular background or skill set that sort of makes for the most successful real estate agent?
That's an interesting question. My opinion is that the ones that are most successful are the ones that take it the most seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what I mean by that is, and in addition to just taking it seriously, who do you have at heart? If you're in it for the paycheck, you're not going to last very long. But if you are in it first for the clients, for the members of the public that we serve, the money will follow. And that's my opinion. So I think that, this wasn't directly your question, but how to be successful in real estate is to put the client first and also to just be authentically you.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is an industry riddled with ego and also a underlying, you've got to fit these boxes to be a successful real estate agent. And I just don't believe that there is one box that you have to fit in to be a successful real estate agent. If you are authentically you and put the client first, you can create your own niche and be successful.
Sort of following up that same line of questioning, is there a personality type that best fits into the industry?
I think there's kind of this notion that you have to be a real people person and chatty catty. Mm-hmm. But I see very successful realtors who are, by all rights, kind of reserved.
Really? Kind of introverts as well as extroverts.
Yep. But at the end of the day, they're there because they serve the client, right? Mm-hmm. And you're going to attract clients who like your personality. So I don't know that there's a personality trait that would necessarily fit the best, but if you own who you are and just allow yourself to be authentically that, you'll attract that person.
Sure. Agency, the concept of agency is one of those areas of study that in real estate school you hear from day one. Can you define that term for us? What does agency mean?
The technical answer is simply that agency happens when one person sets out to offer fiduciary duties and representation to another person, mm-hmm. who would be the principal in the transaction, right? And that can be either expressed or implied. In Utah, implied actually is not allowed. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but it would be going against division rules if you just had implied agency.
So it has to be in writing.
It has to be in writing, and it has to be agreed upon and accepted by the principal in the transaction.
Okay.
Yep.
I see. And does the most successful agent specialize in a certain area of real estate, whether it's a geographic location or condos or single-family residence? Is there some level of specialization?
Yeah, I think there's some truth to the notion of jack of all trades, master of none. However, again, I have a dear friend that sells both residential and commercial and kills it in both, right? And she's been able to do that successfully. I, on the other hand, decided early on after giving my hand to a commercial transaction that I was just going to specialize. I was going to refer all commercial out because it's a totally different game.
Indeed.
You see people who just absolutely kill it in their neighborhood, their geographical area, and they are the big fish in the little pond, right? Mm-hmm. So I think there's everybody can take their own approach to it. But really honing in on what type of business you want to run, and kind of putting the blinders on to everything else, because there's always these shiny objects coming at you, and try this or try that. That's where you're going to you're going to trip up, because you're never going to just hone in on one thing. So
Sure. How does a successful agent in today's kind of tumultuous world deal with buyers and sellers and one another, for that matter, given the virus issue that we're faced with?
Yeah, that's been certainly an interesting thing in our world, and in our industry this year. And we've had to pivot in a lot of ways. In March, April, May, we really weren't showing houses that often in person. I mean, it was still happening, but because we were considered essential. But we were doing virtual tours. We were doing Facebook Lives. We were doing virtual open houses, Marco Poloing a walkthrough on the app for a client so that only the agent had to go in the home and not clients. There was just such a thank goodness for technology, right? It's allowed us to continue to serve the public in transacting real estate amongst just such a crazy COVID environment. So,
well, speaking of technology, how has that changed the industry? And what do you see in the future?
Yeah, well, we no longer carry around a phone book size MLS book that has to get updated every once in a while, right? That predates my time in the industry. But technology is what you make of it. I think there's so many benefits to having the access to what technology provides. Our clients have access to inventory. We open houses all over the nation with a phone. Like, that's wild, right?
It is indeed.
So there's so many benefits. Right now in this market, we're dealing with multiple offers on nearly every property. And so, if I had to go through 18 offers with my clients and not be able to do electronic signatures, I couldn't fathom what that would look like, right? And that was what we used to have to do. So there's pros and cons to it, but I think that it's given us the ability to do things in a fast-paced world that we live in.
You said you open a house with a phone. What do you mean?
Well, the majority of homes that are put on the market have a Supra key box on it. And it's literally accessed through a special app that only realtors have access to. And you have an identification key on there for security. So you know who's coming in and out. But it's Bluetooth. And it just communicates from our phone right to the box and unleashes the key. So.
Interesting. And is that a safe process? Has it been hacked? Can it be hacked?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I've never heard of it being hacked. A little bit of a soapbox of mine since I'm here is realtors who do not wait for confirmation of appointment, who then open the box, and that can become an issue. We just cry from the mountains at the need of professionalism, right? And part of that is when somebody puts their home on the market, they're trusting us to respectfully enter their home.
Yes.
And certainly during this time in our world, to safely enter their home with sanitation and masks and minimal touching and all the things. So I don't know that the system everything can be hacked these days. I've never heard of that happening. But the key is just respectful professionalism in the use of that. And that goes back to just holding yourself to that standard as a realtor.
Sure. Well, there are a variety of brokers in the industry. Some larger, some smaller, some with more training available, some with better technology. So how does a new agent just out of school go about selecting the broker that they should become affiliated with?
Yeah, good question. Again, I think it goes back to you and what you want to accomplish in this industry. And that's different for everybody. Oftentimes there's disruption in the industry. There should always be disruption in industries because otherwise you're not growing and evolving. But people get stuck in one way and think there's a right and a wrong way to do things. And I don't believe that. I think that there's this fits for this person and this fits for this person. Sure. And so thank God we have such a a wide variety of types of brokerages and types of business models. So how do you select it? You've really got to decide what you want out of this industry, and then talk to other agents that are at those brokerages, interview the broker, find out what they have that you can benefit from, how accessible they are, how much training they do, whatever is important to you, find a match to that, right? Because that's going to be different for everybody.
When you talk about disruption, what do you mean by disruption?
Yeah, disruption is kind of an overused word, I would say. But what I am referring to when I say that is just new ways of doing things. Because of the world of technology and just the vastly quickly growing environment that we are in our world today because of technology, there's always constantly this, desire to change the industry, because real estate has, and the mode of doing real estate has been around for over 100 years.
And has it changed a lot during that period?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, thank God. Again, I don't want to carry around an MLS book with me everywhere. And, our code of ethics have changed. Realtors were on the wrong side of history when it comes to racial injustice and things of that nature for a long time. So even our code of ethics have changed over time. There's a lot of change is not bad. But when we think of disruption, it's how you currently do something and doing it differently. And sometimes that can be a really good evolution.
So disruption, you're suggesting, forces us out of our comfort zone. And is that good? What does that accomplish?
Yeah, I think that is good because, I'm a big believer that everything good happens outside of your comfort zone. Big things happen outside of your comfort zone. And I'm not suggesting, again, being from a board perspective and just seeing the structure of real estate from a national level within my board volunteerism, there's some things that are done the way that they're done for a reason, and they shouldn't change, right? But in general, if we're totally opposed to changing in a world that's constantly evolving and changing, we're going to be left behind. And in the world that we live in today, things become antiquated quick.
Indeed, they do.
And the thing I enjoy the most about quote unquote disruption is it forces you to be on your game. Because if you aren't adapting and just constantly striving to be the best professional that you can be, somebody's coming up behind you.
Yeah, that makes sense. At the moment, the residential real estate market appears to be at record level, unexpectedly strong. What's leading to this growth and current level of strength?
Yeah. So we started the year with some uncertainty. That's an understatement.
Yes.
As we entered this, wild world of COVID, and it was all unprecedented and we didn't really know what to expect. But if you look at the fundamentals of what drive the real estate market, it's simple supply and demand economics, right? COVID or not, it's supply and demand. And we've been in an environment in Utah of a seller's market and low inventory for 5, 6, 7 years now as we've worked our way out from the recession. And leading into this year, we had the lowest inventory that we've had before. We had low interest rates. We had a population that's growing significantly, not just by migration coming to Utah because of the Silicon Slopes growth, the tech industry, the biomedical industry, et cetera, but also 46% of our growth here in Utah comes just from our own kids growing up and buying houses because we like to have lots of kids here.
Indeed.
And so then you go into 2020 and interest rates drop to levels that nobody could have ever predicted. Interest rates, at a new record low, it seems, every day, 2.78 as an average. That's wild for a 30-year conventional loan. You have migration that just accelerated even dramatically more because of this telecommuting that's happening because of COVID. People are from massive urban cities like San Francisco, the Bay Area, New York, Boston are fleeing those cities. And Utah is at the top of the list as to where they're going. So you have already a lot of migration that was just accelerated. You have interest rates that were already low that went lower. You had inventory that was already low that went lower.
What is that inventory currently here in Salt Lake?
Well, as of yesterday, we were 56% lower in our inventory than than that day last year.
And does that translate into so many days or weeks of inventory at a certain sales level?
Yep, exactly. So if you consider a balanced market to be about 6 to 7 months worth of inventory, and when we speak about months of inventory, what that means is if no new homes came on the market at the current absorption rate, how long would it take us to
clear
sell
the market
through?
in that period?
Right.
And so what is that term today? A month, 2 months, 3 months?
Yeah, we're under a month.
Under a month.
Yep. So we're probably, I don't know the exact stat today, but I would venture to guess we're at like 0.7 of a month.
No kidding.
Yeah.
What is the current approximately percent of sales price versus the listing price?
Yeah, good question. I tried to look up that stat this morning and I didn't get to it. But I would guess around 103, 104%.
Is it really?
Yep.
So obviously it's a strong market.
Everything's going over asking price.
Given your insight, how long is that going to last?
You know, this is an interesting question. I try to stay away from prediction because, and especially after this year, I'm done trying to predict this world. Yeah. But if we go back to the fundamentals of supply and demand, one of two things would have to happen in order for this to stop. We'd have to have more supply or less demand. Simple economics. Well, what's going to cause a increase to supply? We're going to suddenly have to release all the burden on builders to be able to build as much as they need to. That means tariffs, building costs, more land, impact fees gone away from cities. I mean, all the labor constraints, material constraints. There's a lot of things keeping builders from the ability to build what they need to. Sellers would have to be willing to put their houses on the market at a faster rate. People aren't selling because of COVID. People aren't selling because they don't know how to move up because the inventory is so low. So where do I go after I sell? People get into their homes, and if you're at a 3% interest rate, do you want to really give that up? So building more inventory or making up the inventory that we need, I don't know how that's going to happen. I would love to hear how it would happen.
Sure.
So the other way to slow down the current market would be less demand. Well, interest rates would have to go up to 5%. That's not going to happen. There's too much unrest in our general economy. We're in a recession. And COVID is still going. So who knows when that's going to end. People are going to have to stop moving to Utah. No signs of that. We're going to have smaller families. That's happening at a very slow rate, but people stay in Utah, right? For the most part. So I don't see it going away.
The Mortgage Bankers Association is forecasting 2021 to see or experience a substantial decrease in real estate investment. That doesn't seem to be consistent with what we're experiencing here in Utah and Salt Lake in particular. So I guess what you're thinking is that 21 is going to be as strong as 20.
Yeah. You know, people's housing needs have evolved this year. Home became awfully important in March when we all got sent home, right?
Indeed.
Suddenly, home office has skyrocketed to the top of the list as to what the needs are, especially in the millennial age group. Getting out of densely populated buildings or urban cities and getting out to a little bit more widespread has increased in importance. Just the desire for what you need in a home has changed. And so I think there's going to be continued desire to change the environment that you live in.
Sure, no doubt. I've read, and it's estimated the population of Utah may double over the next 40 years. What kind of impact will that have on our state, on development, on pricing?
Yeah.
What do you see some of the challenges associated with that type of incredibly strong growth?
It's the $1 million question and problem, right? We're a victim of our own success here in Utah, and you have strain on our roads, strain on, January and February, we have some of the worst air quality in the world.
We do.
You have freeways and highways that weren't built for 6 million people. They were built for 1.5 or 2 million people. And affordable housing. We're landlocked across the Wasatch Front, right? We have the mountains on both sides, and so we can only spread out so far. There's only so much land. So there's a lot of challenges that will come with that growth. There's tons of benefits. But thankfully, I believe, watching from the background, that we have leaders in our state that care desperately to keep the quality of life in Utah and our green space and our recreation and our housing affordability and all of that intact to the best degree that we can. Mm-hmm. So I don't believe we're going to react to the scenario, which is great. I think that they're trying their best to get in front of it. But it's not an easy task.
Well, there's always a cost associated with growth.
Yep.
And I guess that's the big question is, what is the cost of growth? That concludes this episode of Stringham Real Estate Edge. Today's program was brought to you by Stringham Schools, educating real estate professionals since 1989. Visit stringhamschools.com to learn more. We want to thank today's guest, Alicia Holdaway, and don't forget to tell us what you think in the comment section below. I'm Garry Barnes, and I'll see you on the next episode of Stringham Real Estate Edge.